Hi. Hi, good evening and welcome to today's Code Without Barriers virtual meetup. And I'm happy to see you all had joined us on a Saturday evening. And I hope you guys are already having a good weekend. And I'm hoping the session will give you something informational and something to take out after the session for the weekend. Okay. And today's topic is about transitioning to Fabric for my Power BI developers. So today's topic will circle around Fabric and the basics of it and intermediate. And for the today's topic, we will have Abubakar, who is a Fabric and Power BI consultant and trainer, and he's also a Microsoft certified trainer, and he's going to be taking us to the topic and through the Fabric. And yeah, before we get into the session, I just wanted to share that the session is recorded. You do not need to record at the end, and we'll also share the recording through YouTube. And there is certificate of participation. At the end of session, we will share a form where you can fill out and get your certificate of participation. If you're joining us for the first time and you had never participated in a previous session, you had to join our community so that you will get the update about upcoming sessions and trainings that we will be doing. And we also have fundamentals and some other associate level training that is going to be free in the community. So you might really don't want to miss out on the session, right? Thank you for joining again. And the stage is all for Abu to be getting started.
Thank you very much, Suraj. Let me just expand my screen and let me know if you can see the screen still. Do you see this
Yes.
my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So again, thank you very much for the invitation. And the as you have mentioned, the title of today's talk is Transition to Fabric for a Power BI Developer. So it's kind of my own story. You can I can relate to that, and those who are listening, they can see what the process is from my perspective also. So I'll be actually giving out the whole process. What are the things to consider, and then obviously because of my own journey, I'll be able to you guys can also relate to what my own experience has been. And please feel free to ask any questions towards the end. Just put those in the chat, and once I'm done with my presentation, which would probably take around 45 minutes, that's how I have timed it. So we will have enough time for questions and answers. So please feel free to actually ask questions towards the end. So let me just start. So let me just first introduce myself. So I am Suraj introduced myself. My name is Abubakar Alvi. I'm based in Islamabad, Pakistan, and I have around 26 years of experience in the industry. So I am a graduate of NUST, which is National University of Sciences and Technology University here in Pakistan. I graduated in 1999 as a computer engineer, and immediately I joined the public service here in Pakistan, where my role was basically as an embedded system engineer, and I grew in that role for good about 16 years. Obviously, I started off with being a hands-on programmer, and then as you grow in a public sector organization, the most of the stuff changes from being a hands-on guy to mainly managing projects. So that was my experience. One of the things that I experienced during my 16 years career was to have some kind of an interaction with data. So the tools were different, the technology was different, but I had a background of how to actually understand data and how to analyze data. In 2016, I left that job after around 16 and a half years, and I basically opened up my own consultancy. So it was a journey of leaving up a well-established public sector job and venturing into the unknown. So that was kind of an experiment, and during that experiment, I was basically working primarily as a consultant, and I was doing my own bit through my own company, but also taking on projects from local and international organizations. So I worked as a consultant for the World Bank Group for about 4 years on short-term assignments. So that was something that I did after 2016. So basically, it was a journey of experimenting with a few things that some of the things that I knew, and then venturing into the unknown and also learning a few bit. So I'll explain, this aspect as I walk through the presentation. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube channel where I post content primarily related to data. You can see the URL there. Some of the content is there is in English, and some of the and well, most of the content is there in Urdu or Hindi. You can say so. As a Microsoft certified trainer, I have been a Microsoft certified trainer for around 5 years now, and you can see some of the certifications that I have done for from Microsoft, primarily around the Power BI and Fabric. I am also a Tableau desktop specialist, and also and also a PMP and a PMI ACP that I have done from Project Management Institute. So that was a brief introduction about myself. So now let me just talk through the agenda for today's talk. So I'll be taking around 45 minutes or so. And basically, I'll be walking you through my own BI journey. So like I said, like I worked 16 years as a full-time embedded system developer, and then grew in the role of a project manager. But my BI journey, how it started, and how I actually entered this field, I'm going to just briefly talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about obviously the main thing, which is Fabric. So for those of you who don't really know Fabric, there will be a quick intro to what Microsoft Fabric is all about, and then the core of the talk would be the skills evolution for a Power BI developer, and what are the challenges that you should expect as you evolve yourself and evolve your skills, and transition from being a Power BI developer to somebody who is familiar with Microsoft Fabric. Then some of the opportunities and the benefits which obviously come with this transition. And then, like I said, I'll be taking questions towards the end. So let me just start by reflecting on my own BI journey. So somewhere around 2018, like I said, I was experimenting with a lot of things. Somebody introduced me to Power BI, and because I had an experience of knowing data, although in a different way, using some different tools, but that was something that was always there as part of my skill. So Power BI was a tool that somebody introduced me to, and then in around I think the middle part of 2018, I started learning Power BI. So learning meant that I joined a local cohort where somebody was teaching Power BI, and Power BI was also not very a mature product at that point in time. Even the interface was very different to how the interface that you guys see today. But that was essentially the start of Power BI. So it was just one of training that I took. I liked the tool, and I decided, okay, I'll spend some time learning it. But then the real change actually came in March 2020 when COVID hit. So once COVID hit, I was deeply engaged in a project with the World Bank. I was working on a project with World Bank in Jakarta, Indonesia. So that required me to frequently go from where I am based to Jakarta, on a few weeks consultancy arrangement, and some of the work I was doing remotely. So when COVID hit, then that assignment actually totally changed, and I was kind of I won't say I was I was relieved from that assignment, but the way the project was conceived, and the way the project had to be conducted, that changed a lot. So that gave me some free time to actually explore some of the things. So because I had taken Power BI, and I had been engaged in some way, one way or the other, whenever I got time, I was experimenting with the tool. So that actually provided me time, and obviously with the lockdowns and everything, nobody was meeting anybody. So that gave me a bigger window to actually explore Power BI. And then there is a very famous platform, Enterprise DNA. So most of the Power BI developers know about that platform. So I actually contacted Sam, who was basically the owner of Enterprise DNA, and asked him, I want to, I've looked at the platform. I like to, explore it more. And then we actually got into some kind of an arrangement where he actually gave me that subscription on some kind of a so discounted or a subsidized rate. So that was my first full-time interaction with Power BI, and then I started working in Power BI. So starting in starting with COVID, Enterprise DNA also had these Enterprise DNA challenges where they were, expanding their community. Most of the people, they, obviously, because of the lockdowns, they didn't have their day jobs where, they were going out, so they had people had more time. So the Enterprise DNA challenges started, and I started participating. I think it was the second challenge where I started participating in the challenges. So that was my journey of learning BI as a tool, and then Power BI as a tool. Then that was the time where, I started to leave all the other stuff, and Power BI was where, I was spending like 90% of the time. 80 to 90% of my time was around Power BI. And then it kind of took off from there. I cleared the DA 100 certification, which is now known as the PL 300. I became an MCT, started teaching Power BI. Also, someone approached me to, if I can teach Power BI, then I started teaching Power BI as well. Then in May 2022, I got a big break. Enterprise DNA, they made me an expert on the platform, which meant that I had a bigger role to play in the community, and I started participating more on the forums. And then I actually recorded a full-fledged course, which is still, I hope, I presume, which is still there on the Enterprise DNA platform. So my engagement around the Power BI ecosystem actually grew, and by to December 2023, which is like, if you consider it from March 2020, for around 2.5 years, I was working with multiple clients as a full-time Power BI developer, and I had taught multiple public and corporate cohorts as a Microsoft certified trainer. So part of that journey, you can also, these links are there. You can just go and look at my portfolio and all the work that I actually did during this time, till the end of 2023. So that was a quick, walkthrough of how my own Power BI development journey actually started. I think I've kind of explained most of the bit here, but what was the main challenge? So obviously, once you start learning a tool and you, try and try to get some work around it, the initial part is a bit challenging. So like all the people who actually start some kind of BI work, I created these I created my profile on these freelancing platforms, and I wasn't as active on LinkedIn at that time, but I started through the Enterprise DNA platform. I was able to get a few projects, and that obviously kickstarted my journey as a Power BI developer. So I've talked about some of the stuff here, and obviously once the corporates engage you to train people, that is itself a full-time activity where you are engaging with corporates. So I was able to deliver a lot of trainings and do the Power BI project. So that was primarily how I actually started. And why Power BI? I just walk you through because it wasn't not a decision where I was just following somebody. It was a decision that that was based on my own research also. So if you see here, this is a very well known figure, or a diagram, or a chart, whatever you want to call that. This is published by Gartner every year. So Gartner is an organization that actually benchmarks across several of the technology areas, where business intelligence is one area. So you can see that in January 2020, Power BI was at the top of the on the top right side, which is the leader quadrant. This is called as the Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So this was around the time I was getting into Power BI. And since that time, every year, if you see from, that was 2020, this is 2021, 2022, 2023, and even the last year, 2020, 2024, Microsoft is one of the leaders. In fact, if you just specifically look at the leaders quadrant, it is leading the pack in terms of the BI development. So it is a leader in the BI space. So I knew that the tool I'm learning, and the tool I'm spending time is a tool that is there in the market, and every year it is gaining popularity. So as part of my learning journey, this is the complete Power BI development suite, as you call it. So my learning journey was mainly around Power BI desktop. Obviously it's the developer environment, and then some of the stuff is Well, just you can say the last 10 to 15% stuff is there in the Power BI service, which is integrated with the mobile app. So I had spent a lot of time on Power BI desktop, not only doing projects, but also because I was teaching. So I was going into the details and the nitty-gritties of how the actual process takes place. So my focus as part of my Power BI learning journey, for those who actually work in this area, they would know that these are the fundamentally the four pillars on which your entire Power BI development practices are based. So the first pillar is the loading and transformation of data, which is done inside of Power Query, or what we normally call as the ETL. Then the second part is, and for me probably the most important part, if somebody asks me what is the most important part in all of this, that is the data modeling. So that is essentially the foundation of whatever analysis you actually do inside of Power BI, that is based on how good or bad is your data model. Then comes DAX, which is the language in which you actually build all your calculations, computations, formulas, logic, everything. And then finally the last bit, which is the bit with which the user interacts, and that is the reporting and visualization. So I got enough time to actually work on each of these four pillars and build on my knowledge in each of these areas. But like every BI developer, after some time you start to think, okay, I'm getting work, I'm looking at uh, you know uh, some of the opportunities that come in terms of trainings and everything. But still, because of my nature, also because I had totally switched from an embedded system developer to now a full-time data analyst, something was always there in my mind that, okay, there has to be some kind of a learning journey that needs to be there. So if I just highlight the part, this part, so you can see this was the part which was covered as part of the learning journey around the four pillars that I just showcased in the last slide. So I started off, knowing nothing, just understanding what Power BI as a BI tool is, and then I learned the basics of data warehousing. Then learned the Power BI tool end to end for reporting, then data storytelling, then obviously some domain knowledge in the areas of the projects which where I was working, and I had done the certification, and I had to build a Power BI portfolio. So this was probably the part where I was spending most of the time. So I knew that there has to be a journey beyond this if I want to, survive in this space, because obviously it's not going to be a smooth sailing, because that soon this space is going to be flooded with so many developers, and the opportunities are going to, get limited. So I, in the back of my mind, had this for a very long time, and I had already started working on how to integrate Python or R in Power BI, learning some of the machine learning concepts, then how the Power BI tool integrates with the rest of the services available inside of Azure. So cloud concepts means, I'm talking about the Azure cloud services. And then everything, if you look at it from an enterprises point of view, then the data strategy and data governance are also important. And finally, if you want to cover the end-to-end scenario, then you need to go back a step, and you need to know, okay, how the data is actually coming into Power BI in the first place, like the data engineering ecosystem. So I was working on all these areas in parallel, which actually culminate in you becoming an enterprise level data architect, which obviously takes a lot of time. I'm not saying that you can do all of this in a couple of years. It requires a long time, but that was something that was there on my radar as I was developing or building my own Power BI or BI learning journey. So at around the end of 2023, which I actually showed you on the slide, something happened, and that was the the advent of Microsoft Fabric. So Microsoft already had this entire ecosystem within Azure, but in the form of what you can say as either infrastructure as a service, or some of the stuff around platform as a service. So we had Azure Synapse Analytics, so we had Azure Data Factory, we had Microsoft Purview, or at that time it was called as Azure Purview. So all of these tools that actually build an end-to-end analytics platform were already there in Azure. But what Fabric did in around the start of 2024 was that it became as a product where everything is just sitting under one umbrella or sitting under one roof, or you just have one window open and you can access everything that you needed to access within Azure, in different services. So Microsoft Fabric was launched as a product for the era of artificial intelligence, the artificial or the era of AI. Even at that time, when Fabric was launched, people were still coming or still understanding what these chat GPT and these large language models were. So just to give you an overview of what Microsoft Fabric is. So Microsoft Fabric is a SaaS product, which includes all the different services which were there already available in Azure, but it brings it under one platform. So these are some of the services. I'm not going to go through each of these services because that's not the main aim. And everything inside this Microsoft Fabric is sitting on one giant, storage platform, which is called as the One Lake. So let me just explain what is One Lake. So One Lake you can think of is your OneDrive for data. Like you have, Google Drive, we have OneDrive, and we have, some of these storage platforms available on cloud. So you can just think of One Lake as as your one drive of data, and all these services are using this storage platform to actually perform all the functions that these are doing. So it is a single SaaS lake for the whole organization that is provisioned automatically with the talent and with the tenant, and all your workloads are basically interacting with this storage and performing the functions that they are doing. So now I'll just briefly explain, what Microsoft Fabric brought to the table. So, considering what AI is now bringing to the table, at that time, Microsoft had this, you can say, had this vision that, okay, we are going to make one platform where we can have everything put together. So think of data engineering, think of, machine learning, think of version control, think of continuous integration, continuous development, think of data governance, think of your, your AI assisted development. All of this was actually put into this single platform. Then the other part, which obviously is required for any data ecosystem, apart from the storage, is basically compute. So, compute and storage are two, you can say, the most important or the fundamental elements that are there in any data ecosystem. So what Microsoft brought to Fabric as part of these services was that there is or sitting on top of the One Lake or your data storage platform is a serverless compute, where you have different tools through which you can perform all these functions that I have listed above. Right? I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties or the technical details of how this is implemented, but just to give you an idea that this platform, the way it was conceived and way it was released, it had everything included. Obviously, I'm going to cover some of the challenges that come with it, but you essentially don't need to do anything else or need to work outside of Fabric in any other tool to actually implement this whole solution. And most importantly, you can see that Power BI is an integral part of this platform. So think of a platform where you are already bringing your BI skills. Like I had the skills that I have built over almost 3 years working as a Power BI specialist. I was bringing those skills into this platform, and this is where the beauty of Fabric actually comes. So if you look at this slide, like I already shown, that I was actually familiar with these four pillars. And what Fabric was actually doing, it was basically focusing on just these two core areas where my skills, which I had already developed and I had already mastered, those skills were relevant, and I had to just focus on these two areas and build new skills, and I could transition from being a traditional Power BI developer to a Fabric data analyst or a Fabric, practitioner. So that was basically the aim, and that is basically now I'm going to cover, the for in the next probably 20-25 minutes, the journey from December 2023 till you can say March 2025, where I transitioned from a full-time Power BI practitioner to a Fabric data analyst or Fabric analytics engineer, whatever you want to call that. So what is the key difference in the approach and capability? So before I actually go and explain my own journey, how I evolved as a Power BI from a Power BI developer to a Fabric practitioner, is to understand the difference in approach and the capability. So like I have briefly said, that this is a unified data ecosystem. So Fabric, it integrates everything from data engineering, data warehousing, and all the way to the analytics and one environment, where obviously Power BI is now, being a part of Fabric, is now primarily focused on just the visualization and the reporting. The last two pillars, which are the DAX part and the visualization part. Then is the scalability of the architecture. So as Power BI developers, and as a Power BI specialist, you understand that some of the limitations come once we are dealing with huge data. Once we are dealing with data sets that have billions of rows, or multiple hundreds of millions of rows. This is the point where Power BI starts to lag as a BI tool, because obviously it is not designed to handle those kind of workloads. Then you have to think of so many workarounds. But with this Fabric architecture, you get this scalability where you can literally go and perform your analytics on massive data sets. With this serverless compute, you have the option to actually use that distributed compute and handle any kind of the data set problem. And then most importantly, you have an end-to-end ownership. So in Power BI, most likely, if you're working for an enterprise, you are just looking at the last leg of your whole ecosystem. But as part of Fabric, now you are a part of this entire end-to-end ecosystem, because now you have a role from ingestion to visualization. Whereas, like I said, the Power BI developers, they just had control, mainly if you're working in a larger organization, just on the reporting layer. So that is the difference that you need to keep in mind. And now I'm going to talk about how I actually transitioned from being a Power BI developer to a Fabric practitioner, or you can say a Fabric analytics engineer. So let's first talk about the biggest question, that is, what is all in terms of skills that I require. So the most important thing is that if you are planning to go from Power BI to Fabric, it is not that you are replacing something. Basically, you are a part of you are going through an evolutionary process. You're just adding something to your existing skill set. Like I said, you don't have to actually unlearn something. You already know how Power BI works, and all of those skills just evolve and you add more skills. So it's just a case of skills enhancement, not a case of skill obsolescence. So Power BI expertise that you already have, you just add the Fabric knowledge layer by layer. It obviously can't happen in one go or overnight. It has to be done in a phased manner, and then you can use your existing skills and combine the new skills that you learn to actually have a broader set of skills. So the progression is, like I said, the Microsoft, how the way they planned this is just a natural progression. And like I said, if I the slide where I showed you, where I was already thinking about my own learning journey, it actually kind of uh, merges into what the Microsoft plan was, and that was the perfect combination that I can think about. And obviously, if somebody from amongst you, they want to actually tread this part, this is exactly how it is laid out. So now let's talk about what are the core Power BI skills that transfer. So I've briefly touched about it. So like I said, the DAX part and the reporting part that is there, you are actually enhancing your data modeling concept. So now you are not just looking at how a star schema is built. You are now actually mapping that star schema onto a data warehouse or a lake house environment or a lake house architecture. You are now actually now not just building those relationships, thinking about cardinality and filter cross filter direction. You are now thinking about how this entire data warehouse is actually working. So that is something which is probably, I think, the first area where your existing skills. So that is why I said that, I always felt that data modeling is probably the most important concept. So if you have good data modeling skills, then this is a very seamless kind of a transition. Next, obviously, the DAX knowledge and the reporting and visualization knowledge, that obviously doesn't change. You can get away with some of the complexity that is there in DAX, because now you have more leverage and more control in the data modeling. But essentially, you don't need to learn anything new. So these are the three areas where your existing knowledge actually just seamlessly integrates into what you need to learn and for inside of the fabric environment. So just don't have to worry about unlearning anything, or thinking about that all of this would be just wasted. I spent this time and all my knowledge would just go away. It is not going to happen. Like if somebody has this misconception, it's not going to happen. So now comes the part where you actually add new skills which are required for fabric, right? So I would say if somebody is already familiar with SQL, and I am assuming that because I knew SQL because I was coming from a computer engineering background, so I had known SQL, but I had honestly never worked in SQL because my transition was directly into Power BI, and I had a few, you can say basic knowledge of Excel, but never occurred to me that SQL knowledge was important as a Power BI developer. But I had an understanding of how SQL works. So the first thing that actually you need to learn is to actually improve your SQL knowledge. Or either if you already have knowledge, then you probably would need to extend some of the skills to understand how the data warehouse actually works. But otherwise, you would have to learn SQL. So that is the first thing. Then the second thing is, once you understand SQL, is then how the lakehouse actually works. So the lakehouse is different from warehouse. I'm not going to go into the exact differences, but lakehouse allows you to actually process any kind of data. Even you can process unstructured data, semi-structured data. So the fabric architecture, and I'm going to show you in the next slide, is centered around what we call as the medallion architecture. So you have bronze, silver, and gold layers where the data passes through, starting from a raw ingestion to actually something which is actually ready for consumption by the end users. So that is the second part where you actually go and build your skills, that how this medallion architecture actually works. Then comes the part which is probably something dif- most people think is probably the most difficult, and you have to learn some kind of a language which is obviously Python. So you would need to learn Python. So although there are tools within this ecosystem that you can't you can obviously work without learning Python, but then this is again a point where I'm saying that you need to go from one level to the next level. So the language that is inherently used is Python, and that is the flavor of Python, which is PySpark, which is the language which is used inside of notebooks in Fabric. So that is the next step where you actually go and understand how you can use a higher level language like Python to do all these things inside the ETL processes, and how you can actually do it in a more efficient manner. And then lastly, that mindset, once you have this understanding, that mindset of handling everything at a larger scale. In Power BI, we had a few limitations in terms of scalability, but here you don't have any limitations. So you can go from, very simple data sets to as, big, as big data sets as you can imagine. So then the thinking process of how to actually manage the resources, how to actually cut the cost, and how you can design a process that actually best uses these capabilities. You don't have to actually do everything from scratch. You actually believe in incremental processing. So how the incremental loads work, how the incremental design patterns work. So this is, that the next step that actually you take. So just a quick glimpse of how the medallion architecture is built. So you have data sources, and then you have the layer where the Power BI is interacting with the end users, and everything in between inside of Fabric is built using the medallion architecture, which is the bronze, silver, and gold, and all your compute, all your Spark engine, Spark notebooks, all your data flows, and everything is sitting on top. So this is essentially the end goal of learning Fabric, that you master the medallion architecture. All right. So that was that is the roadmap, I can say. That is the roadmap which you can say, starting from maybe a few months to maybe a couple of years, depending upon how much time do you have. That those four areas are the areas where you actually need to focus your time and energy if you want to move from Power BI to Fabric. What were the learning resources that helped me? So Microsoft itself has some very good learning resources. I'm sure Power BI developers, they would know that Microsoft Learn is an excellent platform. So then there are other resources which I used. There is a guy called Will Needham. He's where he has a school community where he has actually he actually teaches Microsoft Fabric. So there is a free, variant, and then there is a paid variant. Depends upon how you want to go through it. I would highly recommend somebody, if looking at improving the knowledge, just go and look at some of these resources. And then there are so many Microsoft MVPs. I have just listed down a few whose resources I have used frequently, and then a very strong ecosystem in the form of in the form of Fabric user groups. So all the Power BI user groups are now known as the Fabric user groups. And then there are so many forums where you can just go and learn about this this tool. Then let me just give, so that was something which is, maybe if you ask 10 people, 9 people would give you a similar kind of a roadmap in terms of how you need to go from being a Power BI developer to a Fabric practitioner. But then you need to actually have some kind of an insight that what are the challenges that you would face. If you are already working in the BI space and you want to transition, or B, if you are working in an organization and you want to convince the people in your organization to go from Power BI to Fabric, or C, like somebody like me who is working as a consultant primarily on projects, where I have to kind of do the balance, where I have to uh, educate the customer also that, okay, maybe this thing can be done in Power BI, but probably we can take part of this into Fabric, which is going to facilitate you in the long run. You're not looking at a project to be delivered, and that is going to be there for a few months. It has to be there for a few years, so that the business doesn't have to come back to another consultant to, okay, that this is a product that we built, but after 6 months we feel that needs to be improved. So these are some of the challenges which actually I faced, and I'm just going to walk you through some of these challenges, and we can obviously, you can ask questions around those that I actually faced, and I'm going to just explain what those challenges were, and then obviously some of the solutions. So the first challenge, or the biggest challenge, is that you need to have a strategy for transitioning existing Power BI projects to Fabric. So if you're working as, let's say, a practitioner, you need to identify what are the existing Power BI solutions that need some kind of a migration from Power BI to Fabric. Then there has to be a continuity plan during that transition, or during that phase where you are building something on Fabric. and then you have to balance the development effort with the potential improvement. So there has to be an analysis before you actually jump straight away in an organization and say, okay, we are going full 100% from Power BI and building everything into Fabric. No, it's not going to happen like that. So you have to first have some kind of a strategy and try to take the major stakeholders and their expectations on board. Then comes what are the the challenges. After the challenges, what are the timeline expectations that you need to have? So for the timelines, there would be different expectations based on the size of the size of the project. So you need to actually estimate that as well, very well, that okay, based on the complexity, I need to give a very realistic picture that okay, this is a project that maybe requires, let's say, 6 months. So I would have to, look at all the possible, all the possibilities in a very minute, at a very minute level in a lot of detail. Then take into account all the unknowns that can happen, the unexpected things that can go wrong, and then decide to actually allocate some of the resources to actually to this effort. So these are primarily the two things that actually happen before you actually start to venture into any real world implementation project. Then obviously, if you're working in a team, Fabric has a different mindset of working. Now your data engineers, your BI developers, your Power BI developers, all are working in in a singular environment. So you would need to restructure, or you need to adjust the team structure based on the requirement, and that is a big challenge. So the challenge is to determine the right balance between who are the specialists and who are the generalists in a Fabric centric team structure. Then, because it's a new platform, you would have to educate the stakeholders. So some of the business users who are very familiar with Power BI, you would say to them, okay, your interface is going to be still Power BI, but we can improve the entire process by adding in capabilities which are available in Fabric. So that is also something that you need to take care of. So that is you have to educate the stakeholders. And then lastly, obviously, because this is something that requires money, that nothing comes for free. So you would have to think about the budget and resource consideration. So that is again a challenge, that you would need to clearly understand what is the financial impact of the Fabric licensing, and what are how are these compared to the existing Power BI cost, and what are the short term and the long term benefits of actually going and implementing a project in Fabric. So these are the challenges that you need to keep in mind. Now I'm going to just list down a few potential solutions. And the first and the most important, which I actually learned as part of my learning, was that you have this capability now with Fabric and the trial that Microsoft offers, that you can actually do a proof of concept. Before arguing and jumping into something full time, you can just get the Fabric trial, which is available for organizations, get it for a few people and do a small proof of concept without spending a single penny from your own pocket or from the organization. So that is probably the first step that I would say. And then it is, again, the challenges, while I was explaining the challenges, was to actually just go and do a comprehensive audit of your existing Power BI solutions, where we need to have where we are struggling in the ETL, where we are struggling with maybe the refresh capabilities, maybe we are struggling with some of the way our dimensional models have been structured. So look at the biggest pain point and then take it and do a proof of concept. So that is the first step. And in terms of the timeline, do not plan something over a few months. Pick a problem, pick a business problem, and try it and build a proof of concept that is, anything between 2 weeks to a 4 weeks timeline. Or maybe in some cases you can say, okay, maybe 6 weeks if you are trying to tackle a bigger problem, and then try and build this solution with exactly the same interface that is there for the business users in terms of the dashboard, and then see, okay, why we did this. Is this build or is this migration actually helping the business? Because unless the business stakeholders are not involved, they don't believe that, okay, we are going in the right direction. This anything or everything that you plan to do is going to be a problem. Then think about the team structure adjustments that you need to make. I think I've already explained that you would need to bring in all the people, pair them with some of the specialists that you already have. So it is a mix of generalist and specialist, but the beauty is that all of them are working in a collaborative environment within the same environment. Then, as part of the stakeholder education, you would need some fabric champions. So you can yourself be a fabric champion who are actually working within the organization, within the business, to actually say, okay, this is how we are going to bring in value, and this is how you are going to build something which has a long-term, chance of survivability and long-term, support from within the organization. In terms of the budget, I would say, like I said, if you're doing a POC, don't think about doing any investments. So this is where again the Microsoft strategies is something which I would say is excellent, that they have been giving this fabric trial to people for probably more than a year in some cases. So this is again something where Microsoft has probably played all its cards very well. So what are the opportunities and benefits? So probably this is going to be the last 5 minutes, and then I'll open the forum for questions. So as a Power BI developer, you are, obviously you're working for an organization or you're working as a consultant. Why would you actually spend your time and build your knowledge around Fabric? What is it there for you? Obviously you are able to solve bigger problems, but then and in terms of being a professional, you are looking at what are the opportunities and benefits that I'm going to get out of this investment of in learning that I'm going to do. So think of it that you are no longer a Power BI specialist, but you are actually bringing in capabilities and bringing in, this value to the business, where the business is actually, and you also being a part of it, are able to visualize everything from the ingestion to the transformation. So now you are not just sitting in a silo working on smaller projects in Power BI. You are actually a part of the end-to-end process. Then you get a chance to have this cross-functional collaboration. You're collaborating with some of the other roles in the organizations, where you knew, okay, these people are working on something which is beneficial, but they are now you are working hands-on. You are now creating an environment of cross-functional collaboration, and something which probably you can't even think about in terms of Power BI is the real-time analytics capability. So you are adding that real-time analytics capability to the organization. And obviously, if you are learning, then you are bringing those capabilities also to your profile or your own portfolio. Lastly, and most importantly, where everything is now converging, is basically the AI integration. So Fabric has this inherent capability Power BI, where Power BI was lagging in terms of giving those capabilities. Fabric is now giving you those capabilities seamlessly, where you can, build machine learning models. You can, have, LLMs as part of your entire ecosystem, and all of that is just possible within the same environment. And lastly, you have this capability to see the entire machine or entire entire ecosystem working seamlessly. You are the orchestrator. You can see the end-to-end pipelines, how things are working, how things are failing, how you can actually handle errors which otherwise were kind of impossible in Power BI, where you just got to know that, okay, there's something broke and now you can't do anything about that. So here you are getting that as part of your entire process. So last few words about the career growth, which is kind of what I just talked about. And once you learn all of this, you are adding more skills to your already skills that you bring in from Power BI, and that obviously offers you tremendous career growth opportunities. So now you are no longer a Power BI specialist. So previously, if you were just looking at visualizations and data models, now you are looking at the entire analytics life cycle. So think about it. Like I said, that you're interacting with other people, cross function for functional teams, and you can also think about it as a as a career path from going from a full-time developer to a leader, to a team leader. So that is also coming. You would yourself believe that, okay, my technical authority, being involved in discussions, being involved in all these strategy decisions, and talk about data governance, and all these other things, you would feel that you have more of an authority on this subject, and that obviously brings in specialization opportunities. Microsoft has already offered two tracks as part of their inherent certification roadmap. So those are there. And because now you are working with the businesses, you also have the understanding of how actually the entire business actually works. And lastly, and most importantly, you can actually think of yourself as over a period of time as an industry leader, or maybe as a thought leader. You can start your own blog, you can start your own YouTube channel, you can share your expertise with the larger community. So this is how the entire journey looks for a Power BI developer in the longer run. So last slide, and then I'm going to take the questions, is the key takeaways. I try to put so much information into this, and try to to the best of my knowledge and ability explain that this is an investment where that can have a long um, term benefit to your career. So think of it as something that is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a revolution, but it is a logical skill evolution. You're bringing your own Power BI foundation, and then you are adding more to it. Then by working in Fabric, you actually get to experience the end-to-end analytics platform, capabilities, something which is kind of impossible unless you are a master of, let's say, three or four different, kinds of tools. But Fabric actually allows you to build that end-to-end analytics knowledge, which obviously then you can take to those platforms with more confidence that, okay, I already know, I've already done this in this platform, and I can take to another platform, and I can specialize. Maybe you can just focus on becoming a data engineer, and then you would know, okay, I've done already all of this in Fabric, and I can take it to let's say Databricks or Snowflake, or maybe or all the other platforms. And then this obviously perform allows you to um, allows you a chance to actually have Fabric act as a career transformation catalyst. So if you work in Fabric for maybe, let's say, 2 or 3 years, it can actually provide you a transformation where you can explore the leadership capabilities, your specialization in one particular area, or maybe you can think of yourself as an end-to-end architect, where you can design any data solution or architecture for any business problem. And obviously it leads to salary increases, and all the other opportunities which are there. So that's all from my side, guys. I'm sorry. I think I took a bit longer than I anticipated, but I think this was a topic where I had, not given a talk like this before on this topic. So this is, your chance to now ask any questions that you have. I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see if somebody has put anything in the chat. Over to you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you for the session. I think we covered a lot of, though we took a 10 minutes extra. I think it
Yeah.
was worth the time spent, and I hope there are questions. I think during the session there was not many questions related to the what been told. Let's give them a 5 minutes. Usually people take some time to type it up, so I think we should give them 2 minutes to type it up, as they do not have the mic or video access.
So I see one question just posted. So are we going to stop using Power BI and transition in using Fabric? No, no. Obviously, this is what I was telling, that you actually build upon your existing Power BI skills. So you can still take smaller Power BI projects. You don't have to worry about unlearning any of that. And obviously Power BI is part of Fabric. So most of the skills that you already have would still work for you. But yes, this is something which, if you have this passion to learn new things, this is a very seamless transition where you are working in the same platform, and by just spending some of your time, you can just add to your existing skill set and learn something which has great benefit. And because the tool is new, it is evolving. Microsoft is spending a lot of money in terms of promoting this tool. A lot of organizations, some of the organizations for which I have worked previously, they did not have that budget to actually invest in this entire analytical ecosystem. But now, literally, I know organizations who have just invested like £1,000 or maybe $1,500 a month, and they are enjoying all the capabilities that Fabric has to offer. Okay. Any other question? I don't probably see any other. If we publish it online, do we use Power BI or Fabric? So in terms of publishing, the ecosystem remains the same, because you previously in Power BI you used to publish it to the Power BI workspace. Now it is called as a Fabric workspace. So inherently no difference. The reports are the way these are published and the way these are interacted with remains the same, but you have much more than just Power BI reports or dashboards or apps. You have now more capabilities that you can use. Like organizational apps is a very good capability that is there in Fabric, where you can bring in the knowledge of your data scientists and your machine learning engineers and build applications that the people in the organizations can use. And obviously we are now moving into an era where people would just like to have a chat gpt type kind of an interface and just ask questions. Just think about it, that you are have an environment where you have this capability, where you are just chatting with your underlying data, and that is already there in Fabric. The AI scale is a capability where you're actually talking to your semantic models, you're actually talking to your databases. So just play around with this platform, experience this platform, and you would find there are so many things which are beneficial. There is another question. I actually don't have a background in Power BI, and I'm really interested in how everything works. Could we get a short demo on how Fabric works, or are there any? So just go to the Microsoft Learn website. I think I'll share this slide with Suraj also, so he can probably give it to you guys. But just Google Microsoft Learn, and you are going to find so many resources from Microsoft. There are so many videos, there are so many demos. Or the best thing is just go and have a trial license and start exploring Fabric. We can still integrate it to our internal system or to other third. Yeah. All the integrations that were there in Power BI, those integrations are still, in fact, there are more integrations that are there now in Fabric. So nothing changes. So it's just more capabilities that you have that have been added. All right. Any other questions, guys? You're welcome, Rico. Any other questions you guys want to ask? Any other thing? All right, Suraj, are you there?
Yes. Yes. I think
I I,
already
I don't
provided
I don't
the.
see any question coming in, but you do have my email. You can have my LinkedIn. I'm active on all these platforms. You can go up and have a look at my YouTube channel also. Just feel free to ping anytime on any of these platforms, and I try to be very proactive on all of these social media platforms. So just feel free, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, or just drop me a message, and I'll try to answer any question to the best of my knowledge.
I also dropped your LinkedIn. I don't have your YouTube. If you would like to share it, that would be great. All
Yeah,
right, then.
I'm just typing the YouTube channel name. Just you can enter it in YouTube, and it's going to bring up the channel. And you can also drop me a message. I'm just typing in my email as well, so you can just drop me an email, if you want. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you everybody for taking the time. That is, we do understand it takes a lot of effort in the behind, the presentation, the preparation, making sure everything matches. A lot of things goes in behind, the presentation, and really appreciate it, taking the time and joining us and sharing your knowledge. And I hope to have you again possible. And Thank you everyone for joining as well. And we see a lot of people have joined. Yeah, I hope you will be using the link and also support Abu's YouTube and share some knowledge and also give him some support. That's it. Thank you everyone for joining us for a weekend, and we'll see you in the next one on Monday. And have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Suraj. Thank you. Glad to be a part of this community, and would love to come again if there is a opportunity to come and share my knowledge. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.